On today's show, the Hawks are almost back from the All-Star break. We'll get into that as far as what's coming up on Thursday against the Orlando Magic, plus your mailbag questions and more coming up.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1914 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Rowland, coming to you on a Wednesday evening here in mid to late February. And today's podcast is brought to you by the folks at FanDuel Sportsbook. And right now, if you are a new customer, you actually get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins at FanDuel. And the place to go is FanDuel.com to get started. I also want to encourage you at the top of the show, as I always do, to make us your first listen each and every day here at Locked On Hawks. Check us out and subscribe to the show anywhere you find your podcast. That includes Apple and Spotify on the audio side. We're also on YouTube. If you want to watch the show there, please like this episode as you are watching it. And please be sure to tell your friends about the podcast. If you missed it, I did a two-part episode actually on Monday evening into Tuesday with my friend Glenn Willis of ATL 129. Always fun to talk to Glenn, sort of a state of the Hawks conversation here at the All-Star break. Last week, it was Tyler Jones on the podcast. It's been very busy on the show, and I appreciate everybody sticking around through the break as we get back into the Hawks game action on Thursday. I'll actually be in the building for that game, and we'll touch on that one later on in the episode. First, though, some newsy stuff and then some mailbag questions to touch on this Wednesday evening podcast. The Hawks return to practice today. First time in about a week, they actually convened together after the final game before the break. No huge news, but some stuff to kind of hit on later on in the podcast. And one bit of actually quick news, the folks at FanDuel Sports Network, which broadcast the Hawks locally, formerly Bowie Sports, for example, that is actually now available as a channel through Prime Video as a $19.99 per month add-on. So if you're not a cable subscriber and you didn't already subscribe to the FanDuel standalone app service, it's actually a new and easier way potentially to watch the Hawks in the Atlanta market. This is a in-market promotion only, but I know this was actually announced back in November. People were excited to have this come up when it actually was rolled out, and now it's actually rolled out as of Wednesday. So you don't have to have this, but it's just an option for you if you already have Prime Video to watch the Hawks in market if you don't want to have cable or all that stuff. And we'll save the details later on that. Again, later on in the show, I'll get into kind of the upcoming schedule for the Hawks, which is pretty interesting, actually, over the next couple of weeks. And, of course, previewing the game against the Magic on Thursday. But to the mailbag now, before we get to that. So the first question on today's podcast is pretty topical at the moment, and it comes from Frederick, who says, what will the Hawks do with their open roster spot, and what should, all caps, what should the Hawks do with that open roster spot? First things first here. They have the open spot right now after the deadline moves and all of that machinations with Hunter and Bogdanovich going out, Mann and LeVert and Niang coming in. And they chose basically to have this open spot over keeping Bones Highland, who they ended up waiving about 10 days ago. So one thing I will say, I definitely do not know what they're going to do. That's part of the question here. They've been pretty quiet on this. Honestly, I've been poking around a little bit, trying to find out what's going on. No indication right now. And they're not obviously in a huge hurry, or they would have made a move already, because they have had the spot for like 10 days, 11 days now. It's been since February, I believe, 8th. That's they actually waived Bones Highland. So maybe they'll look at some 10-day contract guys. And if they were going to do that, they would have done it over the break, because that clock is kind of running during the break. So 10 days are now an option. If you want to use that spot to sign a 10-day contract, they could. That is one potential avenue. But I just kind of want to just lay out the actual options they have and kind of go from there. So the first option is to sign a player who's not on the team right now, which is pretty obvious. A free agent, someone who's available. Could be in two forms. Could be a rest of season contract for someone, or even a multi-year deal if they want to do that and kind of show a real invested in somebody. And of course, they could also sign a 10-day contract, like I just mentioned, with somebody else, and maybe take a look at multiple guys if they want to cycle through some different players in the coming days. The second option is they could take one of their guys that are on two-way contracts. There are three of them. It is Dom Barlow, it is Keaton Wallace, and it is Daquan Plowden on the two ways right now. Those guys could be either signed to a multi-year, probably like team-friendly contract, or the Hawks could unilaterally, what I mean is on their own, decide to convert one of those guys to a rest of season contract for this year. Famously, last year, you might remember this, the Hawks did not convert Vit Krejci, who was then not eligible for the playoffs, for instance, and they chose to use his free agency and restriction to sign him in the summer. But that was also much later in the season. And it was also a big talking point because Trent Forrest last year ran out of two-way games, like pretty early. Now, Keaton Wallace might have that happen this year, but it won't be until later on in the season. So that'll be kind of interesting to navigate there. But kind of as a good reminder of that, two-way guys are not playoff eligible. So if he couldn't play last year, right now, That means no Keaton and no Dom and no Plowden. If they were to play in a play-in or a playoff game right now, they couldn't play. That's interesting. Keaton is at 31 games right now out of the possible 50 you can be active for as a two-way contract guy. He has 19 left, and the Hawks only have 27 more games. But if they were to have Keaton be active, he would eventually run out of games. That's notable as well. So number 3 on the option list, number 1, of course, again, sign a player outside the organization. Number 2, convert or sign a two-way guy. Number 3 is they could sign someone who they have in College Park. So that is probably Nikola Jurisic, the second-round pick from this last year for the Hawks, or Kevon Harris, who was actually just MVP of the G League Next Up game. He's been very good this year in the G League. But those guys are not under contract. I know the Hawks drafted Jurisic, but they do not have – he cannot – like, for instance, right now, he cannot play in an NBA game. He is not on the roster right now. So if they want to sign him to a contract, they could just sign him right now. Now, the fourth option is the least sexy of them all. They could just leave it open. You don't have to have 15 guys. It's probably the worst option because it doesn't hurt you at all to use that slot on someone, take a look at a player. The Hawks are not up against the tax line. Sometimes the Hawks have ducked the tax, we'll say, in the last couple of years. Right now, they have the room to sign someone. That's not really a problem at this moment. So they can legally have 14 players on the roster the rest of the year. You have to have 14, but they have 14 right now. So that's not a problem. That's why they haven't had to move quickly. But that's the fourth and, again, least sexy, least appealing option if it's me. Now, the part about what I think they actually should do with this slot, I will acknowledge it's hard to answer that without full knowledge of what's available to them. For instance, there is no one on the free agent market that I am like dying to sign right now. There are some guys who are relatively interesting. Like before the podcast actually started, Jaden Springer just signed. I would have called Jaden Springer. He's kind of duplicative of what they already have, but I think he's a pretty good prospect, for instance. But there's no one that I'm like dying to sign that's available right now for the Hawks. That could change. Guys might get bought out, etc., in the next 10 days or so. But candidly, the Hawks are not going to probably be a huge destination for the better buyout guys. Usually they tend to sign with like title contenders, and the Hawks are kind of in that mid-tier. So they could sign somebody that's bought out, but probably not a huge number one destination for doing that. So with all that said, it's hard to know what is available to them. But my answer is I would be personally trying to sign Dom Barlow to a team-friendly multi-year contract right now. That's my preferred path if I'm the Hawks at this moment with the roster spot. And of course, that would also open up a two-way contract, which for me would be a natural spot for Jurisic to land. They could also sign Jurisic to the same contract, a team-friendly deal. But if it was me, I think Barlow is a little bit ahead of Jurisic. I know they didn't draft Barlow, but Barlow is, by the way, almost the same age as Jurisic and much closer to contributing in the NBA, in my opinion. So that's kind of why I'm saying Barlow instead of Jurisic. But again, if you do that with Barlow, you can then turn around and sign Jurisic to a two-way, have him around your team, et cetera, et cetera. Now, importantly, Barlow does not have to sign that team-friendly multi-year deal. You know, this summer, I praised the Hawks up and down for the Vit Krejci contract. It's a great deal for the team. It's a pretty bad deal for Vit, honestly. So obviously we cover the team in this space, but I want to at least acknowledge the player side. Player/agent, they don't have to sign this deal. The Hawks can, if they want to, just convert any of the two-way guys on their own with no consent, no sign off. They can just say, all right now we are converting Keaton, we're converting Dom to a full contract. They can do that if they want to. But if they want to get the team friendliness, so which means for me, multiple years, cheap, maybe some non-guarantees. Again, Vit's contract is a good example of this, where it was signed this summer, but it's a 4-year deal. It was very team friendly, lots of light guarantees, non-guarantees, team options, all that stuff. So that would be my ideal use of the roster spot right now, would be to give Dom Barlow that kind of contract. But that's what I would do. I called Dom's agent, try to get him to sign that contract. That isn't the only thing that I would do. Honestly, if Barlow won't sign that kind of deal, I would get it. If on his side, by the way, maybe you offer it to Jurisic, the same thing. Or maybe you could just convert Keaton and give Jurisic that two-way contract. I think probably the Hawks at some point this year have thought we're probably going to give Jurisic a contract of some kind, whether it be a two-way, whether it be a minimum, whatever. Usually when you draft a player in the 40s, like they did with Jurisic, it ends up with that guy being on your roster in some form, either a two-way or a full contract. So TBD, it still has not happened right now as of February 19th. They do have options. maybe you can just, again, convert Keaton, etc. But my ideal, one more time, would be to lock in Barlow to a multiple-year contract that's very team-friendly, then sign Jurisic to a two-way and go from there. So hopefully that makes sense. I know it's kind of interesting machinations, but the Hawks do have an open roster spot, which makes it interesting. They're always going to have every day my mentions fill with, like, should they sign player X? It's available. There's some guys that I might consider signing, but as far as what I would do, that would be my preferred path at this moment. All right, more to come on as far as your mailbag questions are concerned. And then at the end of the podcast as well, a look at the Magic game. Oh, and next up, coming up in a second, a look at Dyson Daniels, who's having a fantastic year, quietly or not so quietly if you're a Hawks fan, in his third season. First, though, we're from our partners on the show. This is brought to you by PrizePicks. Football season might be over, but basketball nation is just now heating up in the PrizePicks world. There's no better way to get on the excitement than with PrizePicks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. They have over 10 million members, billions in rewarded winnings, and PrizePicks makes it easy and fun to turn sports knowledge into real money right now. Playing at PrizePicks is also really simple. Just pick more or pick less on at least 2-player projections, and if you're right, win up to 1,000 times your cash. With PrizePicks, you actually control the action all season long, and this week I'm actually looking at the board every single day when it comes to the NBA, college basketball, and more. What I love about PrizePicks is how quick and easy it actually is to make picks. It takes less than a minute to set up your lineup each time. Plus, their fast and secure withdrawals means they actually get paid in less than 15 minutes or less when I win at PrizePicks. Download the app right now today and use the code LOCKEDONNBA. Get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup at PrizePicks. That is code LOCKEDONNBA. $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup at PrizePicks. PrizePicks, run your game. This is a message from sponsor Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back, then waiting and wondering and worrying some more. Now Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can actually focus on your day. With an expert who will find you every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. Also, you get your most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now this is Taxes. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. That is TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service, real-time updates, and iOS mobile app only. See guaranteed details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. All right, a question now from Joshua, who says, where would Dyson Daniels be on a top 100 list right now? So what that is, if you don't know this ins and outs, every year in like August-ish, September-ish, lots of national sites do top 100 lists of their player rankings, top to bottom, 1 to 100, etc. But I would say before I get into this, like it's been a breakout year for Dyson. Basically, it's 50 games, and I will acknowledge that it's only 2/3 of a season. Keep that in mind. But he's already established himself as one of the best defenders in the NBA, full stop. He's having also a better offensive season than I think people have kind of realized to this point. I was quite high on Dyson as part of the return for DeJounte Murray back this summer, and I think people know that listen to the podcast. But to be very clear, he's been better than I thought he was going to be this season in particular. And the Hawks have to be thrilled. I know the fact that they are thrilled with Dyson at this point in time. They are very excited about the way he has played this season. As far as the top 100 list is concerned, it's always hard, and kind of mine would usually be a little bit different than most because, you know, I value defense more than most people do. For instance, the secondary stuff, I'm a little bit lower on the like low efficiency score only kind of players, et cetera, et cetera. But, and look, there's always mistakes. So it's not anybody it's not personal or anything like that. But like this summer, literally a few months ago, multiple of the mainstream top 100 lists didn't have Jalen Johnson on them at all, which is like pretty insane. And I said that this summer, and I was right about that. Obviously, it looks even worse now. He's probably a top 60 player in the league, for instance, right now, if not higher than that. And he wasn't in the top 100 list. So keep that in mind when I'm getting through this. Also, they're almost always an off-season exercise. Like I said before, August-ish, September-ish, usually. There is one national one that does mid-season usually, and it's the Ringer, which I know Hawks fans don't always love the Ringer. I get that. I've had some bad takes over there from the Hawks from certain people in certain years, et cetera, et cetera. But I will say people that I know that work there are smart people. Like they have respected names like Rob Mahoney and Kyle Mann and Michael Pina and Howard Beck, et cetera. Just to name a few people. There's some good work done there as well. So it's not always that. I would recommend people not just like swearing off the Ringer because of bad takes. I get it, but there you go. But at any rate, they did an update like a month ago right now, mid-January, and they had Dyson number 67 on their list a month ago, which I thought was very reasonable at the time. I was encouraged to have that somebody had him that high at that point in time. But if anything, that might be low now, honestly. And Dyson just played probably the best stretch of his career to date while that list was happening and then after it. So he might even be higher if they were to do it right now at the break. Keep that in mind. And I already have the caveat about this only being one season, but in the last 15 games, which again, 15 games, it's only like a month plus, but he's averaging 16 points, almost 7 rebounds, almost 5 assists, on 53% from the floor, and 39% from three over about 5 weeks of time. Then, of course, you throw in the truly elite defense, leading steals, all that stuff. You have a pretty special player, I would say, on your hands at that point in time. Now, I would not bank on that efficiency as far as shooting is concerned with Dyson continuing, but he is about league average this year in EFG, effective field goal percentage, for the season. Now, he does need to make free throws, which he's not done this year. That's been a problem at times for Dyson. It's not a huge sample size. It's like less than 100 attempts at the line this year, but he's not been very good at the line. That's a problem moving forward. But right now, not a huge concern for me anyway. But anyway, I think Dyson should be in that 50 to 60 range, honestly, for me, based on this season. It is one season, so it's not crazy to kind of be skeptical to some degree here. I think I always want to see more of a sample than some might. I tend to lean on bigger samples than others do. But he's also 21 years old. He'll be 22 in March, which I think people don't really understand how young he still is. It's only year 3 for Dyson. For example, he's younger than the Thompson twins, Amen and Asar Thompson. He's only a year, actually, he's more than a year younger than Zach Edey, who's a rookie this year. He's only about 6 months older than Kobe Buffkin, who was just drafted last year. So, like, I have examples of that all day long, but he's very young still is the point. He's still 21 right now, which is very, very young. He's basically the same age as Don Barlow. Keep that in mind. I think where you place him on a list, like the question is asking, is like, how much do you value defense? Honestly, I won't do a full breakdown here, but the defense has been obviously just fantastic all year long. He has legitimately historical steal numbers, like best in the last 3 decades steal numbers, and deflection numbers, which are off the charts. He already has more deflections this season than any player has had in a full season over the last 5 years, and he's got 27 games left. So that's a pretty crazy number in itself. And he does all of that without having to sacrifice the ability to actually defend good players, and also he has a very low foul rate. To have that kind of steal and deflection numbers without fouling is actually extremely hard and very impressive as well. Anyway, it's all difficult to do, but he's done it this year. He's been that good. I think he's been very clearly a top 10 defender in the league this season. And for me, that's very hard to do for a non-big. I think bigs are more important defensively than perimeter players, generally speaking. And he's still done that. So that kind of tells you how good he has been this year, again, at 21 years old. And look, offensively, he's not that yet, to be very clear. It's very simplified, but he is averaging 14 points a game, which is not nothing. I'm not the biggest points per game guy in the world, but that does matter. He's already in the top 60 of the NBA, of course, in assists, 4-ish per game, despite playing with Trae Young, who leads the league in assists, for instance. So they're not huge opportunities to go ahead and do that for him. If you want to tell me this year that he's been a top 50 player in the league, I think I would probably believe you. For instance, there's 3 advanced metrics that I want to throw out there. They're kind of these all-encompassing catch-alls, but Raptor, there's one called LeBron that Basketball Index does, and then EPM. He's in the top 60 in all 3 of those. Raptor, he's 32nd in wins above replacement this year. He's 46th according to B-Ball Index, and he's 58th at EPM. So that's a decently wide range, but still clearly a top 60-ish player in the league this year. Again, 50 games is 50 games, but that's where we are. And look, not everyone cares about that stuff, and I totally understand that. They're not gospel, those metrics, but it's just another data point. His defense, we all have eyes. The stats, the production is what it is as well. And then offensively, I think he's better than people realize he is. He's still flawed. He can't really shoot still. I get all that, but he's become more and more confident as a, penetrator, passer, just more in control of his offense, I would say, the last few weeks, few months, etc. And I think he's already been making strides. So you combine that pretty good offense with elite defense, and you have a pretty awesome player. So look, if you want the last 5 weeks, which I'm not telling you that you need to do that. If you only use that sample, he would definitely be a top 50 guy in the league. If you want to go more conservatively, and I would, generally speaking, and use the full season or bigger, he'd still be in the top 60 or 70 in the league. And he's 21 years old, getting his first real run in the NBA as a starter. So I don't want to go crazy, but just to answer the question, he's been that good this year. And there's a whole separate conversation that I'm going to hold for later about extension talks, because he is, by the way, eligible for extension this summer. And I got a question today, actually, or maybe it was yesterday, about what it would look like. And I surprised the person with my answer But if I'm Dyson Daniels' agent, I'm going to go to the Hawks and say, I want the Jalen Suggs contract, which is $30 million a year for 5 years. Now that there's some sticker shock there. I definitely understand that. That's what Jalen got, for instance. And Jalen, for all of what I said about Dyson, Jalen's still better than Dyson and had done more. But Jalen's deal was a heist, in my opinion, for the Hawks. And if you compare Jalen Suggs last year, before he got his extension, to Dyson this year, it's pretty much even, if not slightly to Dyson, in my opinion. So if you're Dyson, you see that, and that's the comp you want to give. I'm not saying that the Hawks are going to do that contract, but that's what I would be asking for if I was Dyson. So we'll see. That's a lot of money. Also, $30 million is not $30 million anymore. It's all changed. The numbers are all getting bigger and bigger and bigger. The cap's getting bigger. We'll save that for later, but certainly it's going to be a relatively big number. If Dyson is extended this summer, that's okay. He's really, really good. And I mean, this is not even controversial anymore. I would hope, but I said this before Hunter got traded. After, Dyson's been the third best player on the Hawks this year, and I think pretty clearly, and that includes Hunter, who's, by the way, Hunter's having a great season offensively, 6th man of the year, all that stuff. But I think Dyson has been better than Hunter overall. I said that before he got traded. It's not a post-trade change. Like, it is what it is. But Dyson's been that good this year. And he's a huge reason, by the way, the Hawks are having their best defensive season in about a decade at this point. It's not a coincidence. He's been that good. All right, I'll stop talking about Dyson Daniels now. We'll get into more of the upcoming schedule in a second, as well as a preview of the Magic game. All that's coming up in just one moment. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. And with the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started. There's no better way to get into the action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you actually place live bets throughout the game. So if you've actually missed the tip-off for whatever reason, or you want to bet on the fourth quarter, or a comeback, or whatever, stay in the action with FanDuel. They have this live betting feature that keeps every moment of the game exciting. If you're looking for a bigger payout as well, you can actually combine your live bets together into a same-game parlay. They have offerings like over-unders and point spreads and money lines, player props and game props, and so much more. The app is really safe and secure at FanDuel as well. They cover the entire range of sports. That includes the NBA, college basketball, as well as the NFL, college football, MLB, WNBA, hockey, golf, tennis. They have soccer, both foreign and domestic, auto racing, F1, NASCAR, boxing, MMA, and so much more. Plus, the app is easy to use at FanDuel. When you win, you get paid instantly at FanDuel as well. And right now, if you're a new customer at FanDuel, you get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins at FanDuel. The place to go is FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins at FanDuel. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, and the Hawks are back on the floor on Thursday. Kind of a reset here. The Hawks have the most road games in the NBA so far this year. So it's a lot of home stuff coming up, and it's right away. The Hawks have their first 3 games after the break at home, Thursday, and then Sunday, Monday, back-to-back, both at home. 10 of their first 12 games are at State Farm Arena in Atlanta. These first 3, and then a 6-game homestand as well in early March, where they're home for like 2 weeks almost. It's not super difficult overall for the rest of the season. In fact, they have a top 10 or bottom 10, however you want to say that, friendlier schedule overall in terms of winning percentage for your opponents, but it does begin pretty difficult, I would say. The first 9 games are against teams that are currently in the playoffs. That's it. That also includes a 5-game gauntlet in about a week. That's OKC, at Memphis, then Milwaukee, and then Indiana, who's been red hot twice in a row. So that's 5 straight games against teams that are like on pace to win 47, 48 or games or more. That's tough, obviously. Before that, though, it's the next 4 games that are not insanely difficult, but they are very important for the playoff race for the Hawks. And it's because of the following. They're playing Orlando on Thursday, which we'll talk about more in a second. Then it's Detroit at home. Then it's Miami twice in a row. First at home, and then once on the road. So as a reminder, if you don't know this already, the Hawks, Pistons, Heat, and Magic are separated by 3 total games in the standings. It's Detroit with a decent little, like a 2.5-game lead at 6. Then the Magic, Hawks, and Heat are separated by a half game right now. And there are 3 teams in the same division, battling for the division title. They're right there on top of each other. And again, that's who the Hawks play the next 4 games. Orlando, Detroit, and then Miami twice. So they're not incredibly difficult games, but they're not easy, and they're very, very pivotal as far as like head-to-head matchups, winnable games for the Hawks, etc. Before we get to the Orlando game, by the way, one more thing here. It's like 3 more weeks between now and the Hawks playing a non-playoff team. So no easy pickings for a while for Atlanta. Because we're at the All-Star break, I want to at least throw some playoff projections at you. For reference, playoffs here is actually the 8-team playoff, so post play-in. Most systems don't really do play-in projections. ESPN does. It's like 85% or something like that. But these are all to make the final 8-team playoffs. So play-in and then get out of the play-in, basically, for the Hawks, or higher than that. Raptors at 49%, ESPN's at 58%, team rankings at 55%, and EPM's at 52% for the Hawks. So a little bit above average. Obviously, to make the play-in or higher, it's like 85, 90%. I agree with that, by the way. They were very comfortable there. I think not a lock, but comfortable at this moment in time. But getting in the playoffs is a different animal. Even if you are for instance, if you're the 8 seed, you got to win a game. If you're the 9th seed, you got to win 2 games in the play-in. So there's some machinations there, some math stuff, but that's where the Hawks are at this moment. All right, last thing on the show is the game on Thursday, obviously. So they play Orlando for the second time in about a week and a half, and second time out of the 4 games. There's this weird quirk where they don't play at all until recently, and then they play 4 times in the last 30 games, basically, these division rivals. If you missed it, the Hawks did win in Orlando last week, and basically it was a slugfest of a game. Defensively, they played very, very well in that game. They had a 107 defensive rating, despite Orlando making actually a lot of threes in that one. The Hawks forced turnovers at a high level. They rebounded really well in that game. They played very well defensively throughout. Offensively, it was much more of a second half good, first half bad situation for the Hawks offensively. But it was enough for a win. And that was kind of what you expect to play a slugfest against Orlando. Orlando is, as of right now, a top 3 team in defense and a bottom 3 team in offense. They are the polar opposites. Really good defensively, really bad offensively this year. By the way, they are essentially the worst shooting team in the league by the numbers, but they generally crush on the margins. They actually average like 5.5 more possessions than their opponent. So that means they're really good at forcing turnovers, rebounding, this subtle stuff, basically. And they're not a good shooting team, for instance. Also, Orlando has been cold lately. They're 15-7 to open the year, and they're 12-22 since then. That includes 4-11 in the last 15 games, which is a little bit weird because they actually got their best players back. Paolo and Franz came back and they got worse, which I don't think it's indicative overall, but they have really missed Jalen Suggs, who's not playing, by the way, in the game on Thursday. He's actually been out for like 3-4 weeks now, and they are 3-6 in that sample size without him. They're also 7-14 without him this year. So that's a helpful thing for the Hawks. Obviously, you don't want to benefit from injuries, but he's out. They're a little bit worse without him, to be sure. And speaking of injuries, that's the only major issue with the Magic in this game is Suggs. On the Hawks side, they nothing new. If you missed it last week, the Hawks announced that B. Krejci and Larry Nance are going to be out for a while, both times. Krejci with a lumbar fracture, 3 or 4 weeks at least. Larry Nance Jr. has this femoral condyle fracture, which is very strange, but 5 weeks plus. Could be the whole season for Larry Nance. We will see. And from there, nothing else is a surprise. Now, I have talked ad nauseum, I would say, about Clint Capella in the last week and a half, who has not been on the injury report, but has not been playing. I referenced that, by the way, on the show with Glenn that I did this week. So that's a 2-parter. Listen to that for sure. But again, not on the injury report. I reported at the end of last week that the Hawks had the expectation, notable word there, that Capella would be available to play after the break. They did not guarantee it. They said they expected it, for instance. I reported that. Then it was the same vibe today from Quinn Snyder. Quinn at practice was asked by Caleb Johnson at 19 of the game, and he gave his usual brand of basically a non-answer about Clint, and he hedged a little bit. He did kind of say they expect to have him out there, but we'll see is where we are on Clint. I think if I had to guess, he's going to play and be available, but we do not know. That is not a guarantee. They have not been 100% straight on that. It's been the Hawks do this sometimes. It's maddening for people in the media like me, but that's where we are at this moment in time. So with all that said, a very winnable game for the Hawks, but at this very moment, they are actually still underdogs. Our friends at FanDuel make the Hawks 1.5-point underdogs. So close with coin flip, but slightly under. So like 45% chance implied to victory. I actually think the Hawks have a pretty good spot here without Suggs and, not full strength because obviously Jalen's out and so is Veit and so is Nance, but they're not like extra banged up in this game for where they're going to be moving forward. So look, a good test coming right out of the break. They had practice today, so they had one practice and a shoot around to get into, But full speed ahead. Nothing's easy for the next 3 weeks at least, and really nothing's ever easy in the NBA. But no favorable games will be favored by a lot of points. It's all like a lot of coin flips and spots will be underdogs, and we'll see how they fare in all of these. But they just beat Orlando, so a bit of confidence there, having just won that game last week, and we'll see how they fare on Thursday evening. All right, everybody, that's all I have on this podcast. Please subscribe to the show anywhere you find your podcasts. Check us out on Apple. We're also on Spotify. We're also on Amazon Music and Overcast, all those places, Podbean, etc. If you cannot find the show somewhere, please let us know, and we'll have that rectified hopefully in the near future. Also, please follow the show on YouTube, where you want to find the show if you want to watch us. And please like the show and subscribe, share, all that fun stuff. Watch the premieres, comment, etc., to juice up the algorithms. And if you are a YouTube watcher, do me a favor and subscribe on audio as well. Kind of do both. That'd be very helpful to just to help us basically to support the podcast. Also follow the show on Twitter/X at Locked On Hawks. Follow me there at BT Rowland, also on Blue Sky at BT Rowland. And you can also follow my non-podcast work at patreon.com/BT Rowland. All right, everybody. I appreciate you listening to the show. We'll be back in about 30 hours or so with a game breakdown of the game between the Hawks and the Magic on Thursday. And we'll see you all next time.